Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
And I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And here we are with Transcendent one more time. I believe this is episode 16.
Today we are talking about hopelessness and the shocking truth that is in the midst of all hopelessness.
There is a shocking truth, and we're going to get to that. Am I right?
I hope so.
Okay. But first, let's talk a little bit about homelessness. You know, there's a lot of different kinds of hopelessness, isn't there?
There are. You can, and that's one of the most pervasive things I think about when you're feeling hopeless, is you can feel like no one else feels like I do right now. There's nobody else that's ever gone through what I've gone through. And of course that's not true, because hopelessness is actually a universal of our human experience.
We experience that, but many of us realize it's not hopeless forever. There is a way out. But hopelessness means really the most difficult thing you can experience. Hopelessness means there's nothing to look forward to. This is it. I'm here, and I can't get out of this situation. I'm stuck. There's no way out of it. That's hopelessness. It's a feeling that there is no answer.
I remember how I felt leading up to my transition, that I came to the place in my life where I felt like I can no longer live my life as a man. I can't do it. But there is no way that I can transition and go through everything that would require, and face all of the backlash that would come, and all of the rejection that I was so certain was going to come from everyone around me. I thought, I'm faced with two bad options here, and I can't do either one of them. And I felt pretty hopeless.
And you looked around and saw you lost everything.
That is exactly how I felt. And you went through that as well.
I did. When our company was in a situation in 2008, when the Great Recession hit, the publishing business got hit really hard for a variety of reasons. And it was what they call the perfect storm. Everything was coming down on me at once. It was a recession. Everybody was pulling in. They didn't need subscriptions. And those people who were helping us get the support we needed just to keep the doors open, the advertisers were backing off because they felt they couldn't afford the advertising, and so they would just turn to the internet, and we were stuck. I felt very hopeless.
Yeah. I remember that time. I remember walking in, and in the midst of that time, the only thing that we really had was the relationship, and I would walk in and we would get excited about things, because otherwise I don't think I had ever seen you like that. And I think you would say the same for me. I don't think that people had seen me how I was when I was going through
Yes.
that difficult. People at work would say, I don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong. Do you want to talk about it? No, I can't.
I just kept focusing on the future, and what I saw as the future was homelessness. I'd put everything I had, including anything we saved for retirement, into the company to keep the doors open, and I was at my wit's end. Some of our suppliers were cutting us off. We didn't have the money. There were things we needed, and then we had to pay cash for them, which we didn't have. Now, if we didn't have it, we weren't able to keep the doors open. All of those things were problems.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I walked into the company, and I said, I'm just going to have to shut it down. You can take it all. Take my house, take everything I have. All I've got left is my health. And if I keep this up, I'm not going to have that.
And the thing that to me is most surprising from an outsider's perspective, when I looked at you, and I don't know that I even knew how hopeless you felt until after the fact when you told me. But you and I are both very positive people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was surprising to everyone around us that we were feeling how we were feeling. They weren't used to seeing, we both went through these at different times. And people were not used to seeing us as less than upbeat. And you may be going through a time right now where you're thinking, I'm trapped right now. Now, yours might look different. Yours might look like, there's just no one around me that accepts me, and I just don't belong. Anytime I try to go to this place or that place or fit in with my family or I try to fit in with my friends, I don't belong. And no one seems to want me anywhere that I go. That is a tremendous sense of hopelessness.
So you feel you've got nobody. That could be a homeless. That could help a helpless situation.
Yes.
And a hopeless situation. It's helpless and hopeless. That's a tough situation to be in, where you don't have anybody to share with. You don't have anybody to give you ideas. You don't have anybody to hold you up, to support you. And you don't know what you're going to do. It's a tough time.
It is tough. You might have an entirely different type of hopelessness where you feel like everything is just out to get you. You're maybe trapped in a situation where there's somebody in authority over you, or everyone in authority over you, or all of the systems in your life are making it difficult to even stay even. Everything is attacking you and everything is out to get you. Maybe you're experiencing systemic racism, or you're experiencing a parent that is constantly putting you down, or constantly not misunderstanding, what you're going through, or not helping with where you're at. Or maybe you're in a job where your boss is trying to get you to do something that you just feel like, I'm not cut out for this at all, and I don't know what I'm doing.
I don't have the ability to do this.
Oh, that's the worst situation.
Yeah, my coach wants me to play center, and I don't even know the rules of football.
I remember a time when I was working a summer job. It was one summer for a computer company, and we would go into different businesses and we would help install computers and things. And the guy that I was working with expected me to know a lot more than I knew. And he said, I just want you to go over to this place and run a wire from here to there. Okay, yeah, I can do this. And I went over there, and I realized that the wire that he wanted me to run went between floors. And did he want me to drill a hole in the floor? And did he want me to, I don't know what I'm doing. And I had a complete breakdown. I thought, I don't know how to do this. And I think I puzzled with it for probably an hour or a couple hours. And I finally said, I can't do this. And I called back to work, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. And thankfully they came out. But that was one microcosm of how you can feel if you're in the wrong job or you're in the wrong situation, how you feel constantly. Oh, that's hard.
I think a feeling of hopelessness is probably the most depressing feeling you can have. When there's no hope, nothing. That answer is just close the door, lock it, walk away. There's nothing. An example of a hopeless feeling where you think it's over would be when somebody really close to you dies. It's a hopeless feeling. Or you've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. It's a feeling of hopelessness because, wait, it's all going downhill. That's it. That's the end of it.
So the shocking truth about hopelessness is that it gets better.
It does get better.
And that's all that there is to it. And it seems too simple. It seems like that can't be all that there is to it, and you don't know my situation, and that's not all there is, and it's not nuanced enough, and you're not thinking through, and there's so much more to my situation.
My daughter, your sister, says often when there's a tough situation, she says, "It'll work out." It always does.
It always does.
Each of us has our expressions. My expression has been, and you've heard it on this podcast before, either you accept it or you lose them.
Yeah.
And this is a similar, and that's hers. She likes to say that.
The one I've often heard is, it'll all work out in the end. If it hasn't worked out yet, it's not the end.
I haven't heard that. That's good.
There is hope. There is hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Even if you can't see it, that light does exist. Because your situation is not permanent. No matter what your situation is, the fact that we are living, breathing human beings means that our situation is not permanent. Things are going to change. But where you're at right now, you may not be able to see the end. You may have several twists and turns between now and when you get to the end, when you can see that light at the end of the tunnel, and it seems so far away.
And sometimes it is far away, but sometimes it's considerably closer than you thought it was.
And that's just it. We don't know.
And we had that situation when we thought that someone very close to us had terminal cancer. Gave her a year to live. And 8 months later, she's cancer-free.
But you know what I thought was the most amazing is when I was at my most depressed, we went out for coffee one morning, or breakfast, I think. We all had breakfast together. And she was the most excited, or not excited, that's not the right word, but upbeat. And joking around and just having fun and having a good time. And I thought, wow, you're the one I'm feeling bad for, and you're the one that's making me feel better through this.
Yeah.
She had hope when it was difficult to have hope. And that's the question is, how do we find it? Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment, but the first thing we just need to establish, it always gets better. Your situation is not permanent. They say that any situation that dramatically changes the course of your life takes 6 to 9 months, and then you're back to about the same level of your emotional stability as you were beforehand. And that is whether you have something good happen or bad happen. So they say that people that go through really difficult accidents and maybe become paraplegic or quadriplegic, that things get very difficult for a while and you go through fits of depression until you learn how to navigate your new life. And once you learn how to navigate that becomes the new normal. By the same token, if you have something really good happen to you, you win the lottery, or you have something amazing happen, you get something new or something, bright and shiny, about 6 to 9 months, that wears off and you're back to, that becomes the new normal. So these things that we think are going to be dramatic changes end up oftentimes being not nearly as bad as we thought that it was going to be. It gets better.
It absolutely does get better. There is hope. There is hope. Hope already exists. And you may think it's hopeless, but it's actually there. And we're going to tell you a little bit about how to find that. Because no matter what your situation, there are reasons for optimism. There are reasons to discover ways to make it through that.
So how do we get our way through? When you're in the midst of this can feel really almost, it's like a blithe thing to say. How dare you tell me that there's hope? I might know that I need to find hope in the midst of it, but how do I find it when I can't see it, when I'm in the midst of feeling the most depression and the most hopeless. How do I get through that?
Well, one of the things that we can do is turn to other people. Don't try to carry this all yourself. If your situation is one that you are feeling hopeless because you lost a spouse, or you're feeling hopeless because you're in a situation that looks like you're going to lose everything, there are support people out there. There are people that are with you. Raya, I'm sure you know about that.
Well, and I think that this may be easier or more difficult for you depending on who you are. So yes, I do know very much, but I am right on the line between introverted and extroverted. Whereas you are, I think of you as the you are like probably the 99th percentile of extroverted. That you have no problem reaching out to people when you're in a situation. You thrive off of being around people. For me, when I am feeling the most hopeless, that's the hardest time for me to reach out because my inclination is to just sort of hole up and say, I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to be around anyone. And then, of course, that becomes a vicious cycle because now not only am I living with my hopelessness, but now it's also reinforcing itself, going around and around and around as I don't know what to do. And there have been times where you've said, I know you're doing really rough right now. Why don't you come on over for dinner?
I had a situation once where a good friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, went through a divorce. And I hadn't seen him around for a while. So I just called him up. And I said, hey, I have to go to the next city to do some things. And I thought you might want to come along, keep me company. And he rejected that idea. He stayed in his house and felt hopeless. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to come. So I came back to him again a little later on. Eventually, I did get him to come with me. And eventually, just like we said, it always works out. And eventually it did. But it took him a while. He, in the beginning, rejected me. And you might have somebody approaching you because you might be introverted and not thinking of approaching somebody else, and you might not recognize that. I can remember, Raya, you coming into my office. You've heard this in an earlier podcast. And you sat down in front of my desk, and you said, I've lost everything. And I said, you haven't lost me. Well, there was an opportunity for hope.
Mm-hmm. I don't think, with even as strong as I was as a person, as confident, I had as much confidence as you want, as anybody that I know, and I had as much going for me as anyone that I know, and even with all of that, I don't think that I could have made it without you there supporting me, and I needed that.
So look around and see, is there someone in your community, your personal community of friends, of contacts, of people you know? And it may not, maybe you don't have a lot of close friends, but maybe you have a pastor. You can get help, you can get paid help, you can get people that you can speak with. There are people out there that will work with you. And there are helplines you can call or find on the internet. There's help out there. There's a lot of help out there. And believe it or not, there are somebody who are looking for people to help. That's what they do. They like to be the kind of people that can help you. So don't think it is hopeless. There always can be help in the form of a support group.
So in addition to going to other people, you can also focus on things. So what do you focus on when everything looks hopeless? You feel like I'm never going to get out of here. Well, you look for the one thing that you can control. Maybe everything else is spiraling out of control and you can't do anything. How do you get through it? You look for, maybe I have nothing else going for me, but I have this one thing. I have a spot in my day where I know I feel perfectly safe when I'm with this friend, or I'm in this situation. Or maybe you feel like, I can't do anything else, but I can focus on making the coffee every single day. And that one little thing becomes your anchor. And you can get through this by focusing on whatever you do. And don't think that there's anything too small. In fact, sometimes it's the very fact that it's small is what makes it your anchor, and it's your piece that you can be looking forward to. You know what? I have nothing else, but I'm looking forward to every day when I get home from work, I can put on Netflix and I'm going to watch an episode of the classic Star Trek. And that's going to be the one thing that I can look forward to, and I'm going to make it through.
When your mind is continually focused on the negative and it keeps beating you down, and you come back to that and you think, yes, this is hopeless and that's not going to work and I have nothing to turn to, and you focus on it, it can affect your physical as well as your mental health. And it's like an exercise that you keep doing over and over and over until you're worn out, but you just keep doing it, and there's nothing you can do about it. When our company was going through this terrible time, I heard a podcast about a lockout, and we talked about that in an earlier podcast here. And in that lockout, this guy talked about if you're on a ship and the ship gets in some tough situation, there's a hole, the ship might be sinking, or you're being attacked, or something is happening. You do on the ship what is called the lockout. You can go from one end, there are all these little pods in there. And when you close that door and that pod, you turn that wheel and it seals that puppy off. And there you are inside that pod. And because you're inside that pod, you don't know what's happening outside those doors. You don't know if we're winning the war or if the ship is still sinking. All you know is you're in that pod. And because it's an airlock, the ship probably isn't going to sink, especially if other people are locking their pods as well. But that's the way you have to react to all these negative thoughts and all these terrible things. Pick a time in the day and say, I am not going to think about any bad thoughts. Maybe you can only do it for 5 minutes. Do it for 5 minutes. Just say, for 5 minutes, I'm not going to think about it. Maybe 10 minutes. I did it because I happened to be in a play. And when I was in that play and we were rehearsing, when I got to that play, I decided lockout. I focused only on the play. It happened to be a musical. I focused only on that. And I allowed myself to just interact with the people in the show, to think about my lines. And if my mind started to wander over toward the terrible things that were happening in the company, I'd lock out. I would immediately think lockout. You have to train yourself to do it, but it works, and it gives you a release. It gives you an opportunity for your mind and your body to regenerate itself. This really works, people. It really works.
The way that this works is that you're not trying to lock out everything entirely from your life. You are locking out a specific space, a specific time. And it works because you can say, I can lock these thoughts out right now because I'm not completely ignoring them. I'm only creating space right now. And once this time is done, then yes, I can worry about them. If you try to tell yourself, I'm never going to worry about it ever, your brain can't do that because you keep coming back to, but there's a real problem here, and I need to keep thinking about this, and what am I going to do? When you do that lockout, or when you create a space, you are telling yourself, I have permission to worry about this, but not right now.
That's what happens. You transition into that period. So instead of 16 hours a day worrying about this situation, you're going to do it maybe only 14 hours a day, and you got 2 hours that you can rejuvenate a little bit. But eventually you'll get to the point where you're only going to set aside an hour to worry because you've got other things you've got to concentrate on. And it does work. It worked for me.
Another thing that you can do, kind of putting these together, is that you can celebrate small victories through this, or small successes, small bits that you can focus on and say, I may be in a helpless situation, but here's one little thing, one little tiny bit of change. And you find a chance to appreciate that bit, and you find your thankfulness for that little bit of change in the positive direction, and especially if you can celebrate that with somebody else, can really help to build that sense of hope that I can get there, I can make it through when it feels like you can't.
Yes, focus on what you can do and do it. Focus on the fact that you say, look, I completed that. Whatever it happens to be, focus on something that's going to make it a little better, or give you a sense of confidence, so that you can still perform, you can do things, and it gives you more confidence to move on to the next step.
Sometimes, not every time, but sometimes when we're feeling hopeless, it's because we're telling ourselves the wrong story. You can look at the facts and all of the things that are coming at you, and you can decide how you're going to interpret those facts. And if you allow yourself to say, there's all of these negative things coming at me, and therefore I am the victim in a story that I can't control, I can't overcome, I can't do anything about it. Of course, that's going to leave you feeling helpless. You may need to sit down and challenge your interpretation of some of those facts. What would you do? What would you say to somebody if it was a loved one, if it was your grandmother or your best friend that was going through this, and they told you what you're telling yourself? Would you allow that story to sit, or would you challenge that and say, no, I don't think that that's really how it is, because I think you have reason to hope. I think everybody doesn't hate you. In fact, do you know how many people care about you and love you and just want what's best for you? I don't think that you're in a hopeless situation at work. In fact, do you know how much I admire the work that you do and how good you do? I don't think that you're in a hopeless situation in your family. In fact, do you know how much I am inspired by the way that your family gets along and your family does this or that? Somebody else from outside of your perspective may see that story entirely different from how you see it. And you may need some of their perspective, or you may need to challenge your own perspective and your own interpretation of the story and find a new story to tell yourself.
I can remember seeing a story about Judy Garland. Everybody loved Judy Garland. And she thought nobody loved her.
Mm.
And she certainly had a lot more people out there that cared about her than probably any of us out here listening to this podcast. The world loved her. And she never knew it. It's tough.
So we hope we've given you some things to think about and some reasons to have hope, some strategies for finding hope in the midst of a situation that feels utterly hopeless.
To quote my youngest daughter, it'll work out. It always does.
We're grateful to have you listening here as a transcendent podcast listener. We would love to have you let people know if you would pass on this podcast to somebody that you think might benefit from it. We are committed to preserving positive relationships together.
I just want to pass on the fact that you mentioned that encourage other people to listen to this podcast. I just got a report from the company that distributes this podcast anywhere you get a podcast. And I was surprised to discover that we had a listener in Ghana. We have listeners in the UK. We've got listeners in Canada, which really is no surprise. And we've got listeners in Ireland. And we've just started here. This is just number 16, and we haven't really done a lot of promoting yet. We thank you for that. It's been going out there, and it's growing, and we've got some exciting things coming up in the future. 2023 is going to be a lot of fun.
We'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Send us your feedback, transcendent@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next time.